I'm going to be comparing the True Grit franchise to the Terminator franchise. The reason for that is because in part one of this series, I compared the Terminator franchise to the Predator franchise, Terminator 1. I compared True Grit to Sleeping Beauty, True Grit 1s, and I'm going to compare these two franchises. When you look at highest score for each franchise, the original Terminator movie has a 100%. The 2010 version of True Grit with Jeff Bridges has a 95%. But when you look at lowest score, however, Genesis only has a 26%. The 1969 version of True Grit has an 88%. When you look at average score, True Grit has an average of 91, while Terminator has an average of 65. When you look at gap between lowest and highest score, with Terminator, you got a gap of 74. With True Grit, it's a gap of only 7. True Grit has won 3 of the rounds so far, so it's going to be winning no matter what. But let's look at my personal opinion. The big difference between these two franchises really is that one of them has much more of a connection to me. It's one that I'm much more invested in. The other one, True Grit, is one that I'm not as connected to, because I've seen the 2010 version of the story, yes, but I've watched it only one time. That was quite a good amount of time ago, a few years ago, and I think I may have been tired a bit, so I don't know if I caught everything. Thus, I don't really remember a lot from this movie. I only remember a little bit. Also, with Terminator, I've seen 2 different TV shows, Terminator Zero as well as Sarah Connor Chronicles, whereas I have not seen any True Grit TV show. I also have seen every single Terminator movie. Yes, I haven't rewatched T3 Rise of the Machines anytime recently, but I know I have seen it before, however, whereas I've not watched every True Grit movie. So for me, I'm definitely going to pick Terminator, because even though it hasn't been as consistent, it is one that I'm much more invested in. That's a world and set of characters that I like to spend time with. It's a world that I want to explore. Plus, inherently, Terminator is more my thing, action, sci-fi. I'm into that genre more than Western. I mean, I've seen a few Westerns, is at least one that I've watched before and enjoyed. And yes, I have seen 3 seasons of Yellowstone, which is basically a Western TV show. But inherently, I'm more into action, sci-fi. When I look at the original 2 Terminator movies, they're both great, I would say. I mean, with the first Terminator, do all the technical aspects of the movie hold up today? No, there are certainly moments in the movie where it does come off as dated, where the visual effects don't exactly hold up all that well, but in so many other ways, Terminator holds up well. I think that the way it blends together all these different genres, it's an action movie, it's sci-fi, it's romance, it's also a horror film. It plays out in a lot of ways like a slasher, but with action, sci-fi, romance put in there as well. I mean, you have the unstoppable monster systematically killing people, going after our main hero. That's very much like something you'd see in a horror slasher, but with sci-fi added in because it's a robot hunting our main character. Also, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, and Michael Biehn give great performances. And it's very interesting when you think about Sarah Connor in that first movie, because at first, she's not some big action hero. No, no, no. She's a regular average girl that just wants to spend time with her friends, that's a waitress. But then the events that she goes through in this movie change her, they transform her. Then you get into Terminator 2 and you see Sarah Connor has become badass action hero, but she also is a bit crazy. She also has lost her humanity to the point where she's almost like a Terminator. But the events of T2 do change her for the better. By the end, it's not that Sarah Connor suddenly isn't a badass action hero. She still is that, but she softened a bit. Some of the rough edges have been sanded off, where Sarah has regained hope for the future, which she did not have previously, and she's learned to connect with John better. Thus, the two of them have a better relationship. Also, I like how you have that moment where Sarah becomes kind of like a Terminator and hunts down Miles Dyson, but she cannot bring herself to point blank execute him. When he's there on the ground, wounded, begging for his life, Sarah can't bring herself to actually pull the trigger. Also, the change we see in the T-800 Terminator is really powerful in T2. Seeing this Terminator become more human, become like a father figure to John, works really well. And the ending where the T-800 sacrifices himself, it's really powerful. Also, the visual effects in T2 are fantastic, and in fact, hold up better, frankly, than some big budget Hollywood blockbusters that have come out within the past few years. The effects for the T-1000 are great. The T-1000 is a very menacing villain. Robert Patrick did a great job. Also, it's interesting when you think back to the first Terminator movie that Kyle Reese is not some big jacked guy. Oh, no. Next to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael Biehn looks like an itty-bitty little guy, which helps to make the situation for humanity seem even more desperate, that the Terminator is such a physically imposing character. And it's interesting, too, when you know that Arnold Schwarzenegger was originally supposed to play Kyle Reese, but then he could not talk about anything except the Terminator, and thus James Cameron was like, hey, Arnold, how about you play the Terminator? And so the dynamics ended up shifting a lot. Also, the music, Terminator, I think is quite good, especially that main theme from Brad Fiedel. Then the music for T2 is fantastic as well. I think T3 Rise of the Machines is a bad sequel because it commits the ultimate sequel sin. It's both a rehash of T2, but it also undermines the ending of Terminator 2 by saying everything our heroes did previously didn't matter and didn't amount to anything because, oh, Judgment Day just happens anyway. So, whatever, they might as well have not done anything to try to prevent Judgment Day because, well, it was all pointless. So, Miles Dyson sacrificed himself for absolutely nothing. Also, T3 gets way too goofy. I think Nick Stahl was just dramatically miscast in T3 because I get that John Connor is not in a good place in his life, but Nick Stahl constantly makes John Connor seem weak. He has nothing at all that would indicate this is the guy that's going to be mankind's savior. He has no strength, no kind of initiative or leadership skills. Also, I think that the TX is nowhere near as intimidating as the T-1000 is, and it's very weird they try to make this killer robot sexy. And then you get to Salvation, a movie that I think has been overly criticized for a long time. Is it perfect? No. You can tell watching the movie they're not really sure if John Connor or Marcus Wright is supposed to be the main character. Also, would I have preferred that this movie actually have the same visual look as the future scenes from the first two movies? Yeah, I would have really liked to see that. A movie that has the same blue-black look as T1 and 2. And yeah, Skynet's plan doesn't really make sense if you stop and think about it. It's pretty overly complicated. They could have just, killed Kyle Reese as soon as they had captured him. But, however, I think a lot of people don't give this movie enough credit for the things it does right. This is the only Terminator movie that's really doing something different. It's set in the future war. I like that we're exploring this idea that John Connor's not in positional leadership yet. He's not technically in charge of the resistance yet, but he has the respect of the people. Also, I like seeing new Terminator designs. There's really good action. There's good visual effects. I like the idea of the Marcus Wright character, that he was someone who killed people, but then he's basically given a second chance, and at the end he actually does the right thing and sacrifices himself to save John. Then you get to Genesis, which I can enjoy as big budget Terminator fan fiction, but I don't think it's really a good movie. It's way too overly complicated. I think having John Connor be a Terminator is just a bad idea. Dark Fate is also a movie that I actually enjoy. I think, like Salvation, it gets overly criticized. I mean, I get why people aren't happy with what they do with John Connor's character, but looking at the lore of this series, I get why the filmmakers did what they did. Would it have been better to either not kill John Connor off at all, or at least wait until later on in the movie so we can actually spend some time with John before he dies? Yeah, that would have been nice. But I like that in Dark Fate we're introduced to the Rev 9. The idea that this Terminator can split the metal endoskeleton and liquid metal, have them both be separate. That's actually a smart way to advance the Terminator that makes sense. Also, I like that this one is set in Mexico City for a good amount of the runtime. It's not just set in Los Angeles. Also, I like what they're doing with Grace character in this movie. I mean, admittedly, the reveal that this lady is actually the savior in this case, yeah, is pretty heavily telegraphed. That's true. But I still like what this movie does with the T-800. I think it makes sense that if a T-800 was around for this long, for decades, without instructions from Skynet, that he would actually become even more human than the T-800 in Terminator 2 was. So at the end of the day, I have to choose the Terminator franchise because I just like the lore and mythology that's been set up for this franchise. It naturally lends itself to telling more stories. I like to explore this world and spend time with these characters, whereas I am significantly less invested in True Grit. But True Grit's going to be winning, however. That'll be it for this one.